I want to get started on time because I know you guys all need a good night's sleep so you'll be in shape for the Super Bowl. It takes a lot of energy, you know, the cheering and everything. Just be careful, don't get hurt when you're jumping up and down. Anyways, I just want to begin. We're all familiar with the story of our father Abraham. And he was raised in a culture which was dominated by idolatry. The entire world was steeped in idolatry. He had no teacher. And he embarked on a journey of discovery, of discovering the true creator of the universe. He had nobody to help him. He only had his own mind and his burning thirst for knowledge and for truth. And at a certain point in time, God told him, leave your land. Leave your land, your birthplace, your father's home. Leave your entire family and go on a journey to the place that I will show you. That's a tremendous quality. An individual, we're all affected by our childhood indoctrination and the ideas of our culture. How many people have the ability to challenge them, to think the matter through, to be able to have the courage to oppose, to stand up for truth? And that's what attracted me to our guest speaker, to Nonie Darwish. I read, she has 3 books, I've read them all. Now they call me infidel. Here is a very, very unique person. And this is the kind of person that's special, that we're looking for, a person that was raised in Egyptian culture, the Islamic culture, with all of the negative attitudes that they have to Israel, to Jews, and so forth. And yet she was able to challenge them, to think about them, to question, to discover. And she was able to discover the truth and initiated a whole new way of looking at the situation. And she's been to Israel many times. And she's become a voice calling for freedom, for rights, for change within the Islamic world, and has become attached to the Jewish people. In our history, we have many people, non-Jews, who've discovered the Jewish people, who've become attached to the Jewish people. So that ability to leave her homeland, she's been rejected by virtually everybody. You can imagine what it takes. To have that wisdom, that insight, and the courage of your convictions to get up there and speak the truth to people that don't want to hear these kinds of things. That's one of the reasons that I invited her to come here tonight. I see 2 purposes. One is what we call akaras hatov. If you have a person like that, a person that has that wisdom, that insight, that courage, we have to show our appreciation. That's the first thing. That's the first reason. Secondly, you have to read her books. I've never seen anybody with such an insight, psychological insight, philosophical insight into the nature of Islam and the effect that it has on the Arab culture, and thus the consequences that this will have. So in terms of an intellectual assessment of the situation that's going on today and what the possibilities and prospects are for peace with Israel, I can't think of any other person who's more qualified to offer her ideas and her opinions on this subject. So with that in mind, it gives me great, great pleasure. It's a big honor. I would like everybody to stand and show our appreciation for our guest, Nonie Darwish.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. I want to thank you very much for inviting me here tonight. And I want to thank Rabbi Mann for his invitation and his hospitality. Thank you. It's a blessing to be here, to be standing under this, to be in this holy place. I'm in awe of the rich culture, the wisdom and legacy of the Jewish people. Thank you. I'd like to start at the beginning to just give you an idea about my background for those who don't know. I was born and raised as a Muslim in Cairo, Egypt, but I grew up as a child in the 50s in the Gaza Strip. And the reason I was in Gaza was because Gaza at that time was part of Egypt. And Gamal Abdel Nasser was the president of Egypt, and he had a revolution in 52, kicked the king of Egypt, and ruled Egypt, promising freedom and democracy. Same thing that we had just a year ago. His mission was to destroy Israel. He sent my father to head the Egyptian military intelligence in Gaza. And my father started something called the Fidaiyin operations. The word Fidai means men who self-sacrifice. And they would go into Israel, cross the borders, go into Israel, cause as much damage, destruction, and terror, and come back. And I grew up in the heart of the Arab-Israeli conflict. My father was very worried about his safety. There were several attempts to kill him because of the operations against Israel. One night, the Israeli commandos came into our heavily guarded home. And my father, by coincidence, was not home that night. All they found were women and children. My mother, a maid, and us 5 children. They left us unharmed. Even though the Fidaiyin used to kill civilians, families, children, it didn't matter to them. But I didn't even wake up that night. I didn't know anything about what happened, but I remember as a child I woke up one morning and I saw my mom was very upset. There was a lot of commotion. I saw a truck. They took all the security around our house to check, to take them for interrogation, to know who was the traitor who allowed the commandos to come. And I remember one of the soldiers who never returned. His name was Abdul Halim. And he was my favorite soldier because he used to take us in the truck, the military truck, to the beach. And he used to give us candy. He never returned from the interrogation. And we were told he was killed during interrogation. So this is the kind of interrogation that we are familiar with in the Muslim world. I attended Gaza elementary schools, where we learned hatred, vengeance, retaliation. Peace was never an option. I never remember hearing any discussion about peace. The concept of peace was something foreign. Actually, the word peace was never even mentioned in the services of any mosque. The word peace was mentioned one time only in the Quran, and it was, if you're weak, accept peace, and if you're above, don't accept peace. That's the only concept of peace that I understood. And so we recited poetry every day in the school, wishing upon ourselves to die as martyrs. I used to see girls reciting this poetry while they're crying, and they would wish upon themselves to die as a martyr. See, our value system was about victimhood, thinking of ourselves as victims, or to be a martyr, to go kill everybody and die as a martyr, either a victim or a martyr. There is nothing in between. But I lived in this atmosphere thinking all of this is normal. When I never used to go, women don't go to mosques, but we used to hear the service of the mosque either on radio or on TV. So, and I remember every Friday prayer, the sheikh would be, at the end of the sermon, he would curse, may God destroy the Jews and the infidel and even the Christians and non-Muslims, and he would call non-Muslims the enemies of Allah. And so I grew up with this, and believe it or not, if you grow up with cursing as a form of prayer, it can feel and sound normal. Hatred can be normal, because who am I to judge? These are my religious leaders. And I never noticed that this is not not holy. So this is how I grew up. 22 Arab countries did everything they could to make life impossible for Israel to exist. The Arab League forbade absorbing the so-called Arab Palestinians, rejected to give them citizenship in any Arab country. So you could see a Palestinian born in Cairo, for instance, and never get the citizenship and die in Cairo. They are born and die in Syria, a Palestinian, and they never get a citizenship. Why? Because the Arab League wanted the Palestinian problem never to be solved. This is not their agenda. The agenda is to keep them refugees from birth to death. Home. That's what the plan was. My father was eventually killed by Israel to end the Fida'iyyin operations. After he was killed, my mother and my siblings, we moved back to Cairo. And I remember I was only 8, and I remember people coming to his funeral and telling us, "Congratulations, your father is in heaven now. He's a shaheed." And I remember I just hated the word shaheed. I hated the word jihad because it took my father away. But I couldn't verbalize it. I couldn't say it. And I didn't want my father to be shaheed. I wanted him down here with us. But the culture was so for sacrificing. They encouraged women to stand up in front of the cameras and say, "I gave my son to the jihad, and I want my other children to die in the jihad." Women who are for life, for peace, were looked down upon. Women who would be radical, if not more radical than men, who will promote jihad for their children, were lifted up as honorable women to be respected in society. So for a woman to be respected in Islamic society, you have to be as radical, if not more radical, than men. And that is why a lot of women are silent. They are proud to give their children to jihad. And many people told that to my mother, to my grandparents, after my father died, that, "Yo, boy, you're lucky. He's in heaven now." It's the only way to go to heaven is to go and kill the infidel and die in the process. It's a very convoluted way of thinking. But at that time, I never thought of it this way. So the Arabs of Israel were pushed constantly, they are rejected from being absorbed and constantly pushed against the borders with Israel in order to keep the problem alive. The Arab world doesn't have a shortage of land. If you look at the Arab world from the Atlantic Ocean, Morocco, all the way to Persia, from Turkey all the way to Sudan. At that time, when I was a child, the Sinai was practically empty desert. Nobody lived in the Sinai. Like today, there is Sharm el-Sheikh, all the nice beaches. This was a military zone. And there is absolutely no need, no pressing need for Arabs to be so dwelled on wanting to throw the Jews in the sea. This international conflict called the Arab-Israeli conflict really is a fabrication. This is not a conflict over land. And anybody who thinks it's a conflict over land is misguided, because we don't see the truth. The truth is Arabs, there is something in Islam anti-Jewish, anti-Christian. especially anti-Jewish, and I will tell you why. Those people calling themselves Palestinians who live in the Gaza and the West Bank are the pawns of the Arab world. I don't believe that they care about their happiness or welfare. They are set up to live a miserable life on purpose in order to show the world that we're victims. Do you think Saudi Arabia, with all the money they have, the Gulf countries, all these oil money, they can't give them good roads and good homes and good police and turn it into a productive area of the Middle East? They can, but that is not their objective. There is a hidden objective, and I don't understand why Western culture doesn't get it. Why Western media doesn't get it. It's so obvious. So the unemployed people in Gaza and the West Bank, all this high unemployment, where do they go to work? Do they stand on the border of Egypt to get a job? Do they stand on the border of Syria or Jordan? No. They line up on the borders of Israel to the very people they are supposed to kill. It's a very unnatural way of living. And nobody sees it. But they go and blame Israel. They compare the living standard of the West Bank and Gaza with Israel, a democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East. Why don't they compare the living conditions of Gaza and the West Bank with Egypt, with Syria, with Jordan? And if they do, they will find that the standard of living is even higher than many areas of the Arab world. But Western media are too lazy to compare apples with apples. They want to compare apples and oranges. It is. I don't know, how can I call Western media ignorant? They should not be ignorant. And then they go and ask Israel, why don't you do some concessions for the Palestinians? I never hear them stand up to Arab leaders and ask Western media, why don't they ask Arab leaders, how about some concessions to the Israeli people? We never hear that. And it's very convenient to blame all of this terrorism on, after 9/11 especially, they blame the terrorism. Oh, it's because, we have this terrorism everywhere by Muslims, and it's all because of the occupation. If it wasn't for the occupation of Gaza, if it's not for the occupation of the West Bank, we wouldn't have a problem. The problem all is because of Israel. That's what they want to give the impression. And this is a big lie. Because I lived in Gaza as a child. And I witnessed the terrorism against Israel before the occupation of Gaza and before the occupation of the West Bank. And our media here doesn't even know that. There was terrorism against Israel before the occupation. So people who are Arabs who claim that they are doing terrorism now because they want freedom, democracy. No. There is no freedom and democracy in any Arab country, let alone the West Bank or Gaza. So we have to really call a spade now. This is too serious to just take all these lies and look the other way. I started changing. After I lived in Egypt for many years, I graduated from the American University in Cairo in sociology and anthropology, and I studied Islamic society from an American viewpoint. Thank God. And this is how I started asking questions. Because it's very, very hard to know the truth if you rely on Arab media, if you rely on the culture around you. And because of life in an oppressive society, I moved to America. I moved to America in the end of 78, 79. And my life completely changed. I am so grateful because this is when I started learning the truth. But I had a quest for the truth. See, there's a lot of people who move here from the Arab world. But they live in their little cocoon and many of them don't want to know the truth. I started, thank God, a good thing also is I moved alone. So I didn't move with this big family around me that prevented me from befriending, So whenever I used to go to work, I used to make lots of women friends. And I discovered after I made friends with them, they were Jewish. I noticed that I somehow attract the culture, and they are attracted to me. We have a similar worldview. And I discovered that there's so much similarities. And one time I wanted to go to attend a synagogue and a church because I was curious. I thought they were going to curse the Arabs the same way we curse them in our mosque. And I was just shocked and surprised to the holiness of the place. They were praying for everybody. They were praying for peace on earth. How can we leave this earth a better place? This was so... It was a totally different way of thinking. The opposite of what I grew up with. And that's when I went to a mosque here also in Los Angeles. And I thought that because they allowed women, that it was going to be different here within America. I am so glad that, Islam in America must be so different. So I went to the mosque, and I heard anti-Semitism again in the mosque. And I was told, don't assimilate in America. We're here to Islamize America. They were looking down at American culture. They were looking down at this society. And I felt very uncomfortable. I said, oh my God, there is an agenda here. And I never went back again. I lived for 17 years in America with nothing, no spiritual life. I went to work, my first job in America. I was walking in the hallway, and as a new immigrant, I was reading everything. Wherever I go, I would read. I wanted to know. And I read a sign that said, this institution does not discriminate in hiring on the basis of national origin, race, religion, or gender. And I had to read it over and over and over again. Because in my culture of origin, it is your legal status depends on whether you're a male or a female, depends if you're a Muslim or a non-Muslim, and in some instances on your race. I was in awe. I felt I'm saved. I'm saved in America. I was grateful for this Judeo-Christian culture. I knew right away, this value system is not a coincidence. This value system is a Judeo-Christian value system. And I lived my life. I prospered in America, had kids. But I went to Egypt. After my kids grew up, in 2001, they said to me, "Mom, we want to see your country." So I took them to Egypt. It was the summer of 2001. And even I haven't seen Egypt for a long time. And I was stunned from the airport by the Islamic impact. It was not like that when I left. They were talking about jihad. There was a lot of anger. And I used to be a journalist for a few years before leaving, so I get all the papers to read the articles. And I read articles that are very, very insulting and hateful about the American ambassador because he was Jewish, criticizing him in a vulgar way. And I was just very disgusted. And I felt very bad. I was almost in a depression over it. My kids, had similar experiences, and they were born and raised in America. And we were in a taxi one time, and the taxi cab driver was insulting the Christians in Egypt. And my daughter was like, "Mom, what is this? What is this?" And I said, "Welcome to the Middle East, honey." She couldn't believe her ears that people would hate other people just because of their religion. We came back to Los Angeles September 10th at night. I went home, woke up in the morning, and saw the second airplane hitting the Twin Tower. And the minute I saw it, I knew it. This is the anger I left behind. This is the jihad propaganda, day in and day out. And lo and behold, 2 days later, I find out Muhammad Atta is the leader of the 19 terrorists from Cairo, the same city I came from. I was shocked. I wept. It's a very strange feeling when your culture of origin is attacking your country now. And I called many people I know in Egypt. I wanted them to comfort me. I wanted them to tell me something is wrong in the way we are bringing up our kids. It's time to do some soul searching. I wanted them to do that. Is teaching hatred to children a good idea? I thought this was going to be the discussion in the Arab world today. And I called at least 8 people. Each and every person I called, and they didn't know each other, many of them, told me the same thing. Nonie, how dare you say Arabs did this? Don't you know this is a Jewish conspiracy? The Jews did it. They were running out of the building because they knew it was going to happen. They were angry at me for daring to say that we have to look within to stop this insanity. I hung up the phone and wept again. I never planned to do what I'm doing. What I'm doing came as a reaction of these phone calls. I hung up the phone, and it's a very strange feeling, and very few people ever feel it. But it's a feeling of being totally alienated from your culture of origin, from the people you grew up with, from the culture that you grew up in. This is not a happy feeling. It's very sad. But how can I feel related to a culture that totally relies on fabrications and lies. It's a very strange feeling that I don't wish it on anybody, because it was very sad. And I immediately went to the computer and wrote an article, why I support the state of Israel. And in it, I exposed the hatred and the jihad. It was almost a cleansing of my mind and my feelings to write this article. And I thought that was going to be the end of it. I wrote the article, and it got published in a women's federation, Republican Federation, their newsletter. Lo and behold, I started getting a lot of people who want to publish the articles and want me to come and speak. So this is how I started. I told them I'm not a good speaker. So anyway, I had a very good Jewish friend. She came and told me, come and speak at my Hadassah group. And this is how it started. I went to my first speech after the was in a Hadassah women group. And I remember until today, there were two ladies, older ladies, who were Holocaust survivors, who were sitting in the front row. And as I was speaking, I was pouring my heart, and I looked down at them and they were crying. And suddenly I couldn't continue. I started crying. It hit me. How could we do this? How could we lie and accuse people of something we Arabs know very well we have done ourselves? How could this happen? What kind of value system allows a person or allows a culture or a religion to lie and accuse their enemies of something that they know they've done themselves? They know that Osama bin Laden did that. They know that he was financed with Arab money, with oil money until today. How could they accuse the Jewish people of that? And that was when just the light bulb, it was just the truth came to me. And I said, I am dedicating my life to speaking the truth. I cannot stay silent anymore. And I love my people. I love the culture, but I cannot accept the dysfunctional aspects of the culture, the destructive aspect of the culture. And actually, I'm not only speaking for the sake of the Jewish people or for the sake of America. I'm speaking for the sake of the truth, because I love my people. When you love somebody, you have to speak the truth. They have to know the truth. And it's time for the Arab world to understand why they have this deep hatred. This destructive hatred is hurting the Arabs more than anybody else. Teaching children like I was taught to hate is destructive. It's child abuse, because your whole priorities in life is changed. You're not motivated to making this world a better place. You're motivated to hate and kill. And this has to end. It's not good. Is it any wonder that the chaos that's happening in Cairo, in Syria, in Libya, in Tunisia, everywhere, in Pakistan and Afghanistan? Because when you fill the hearts of a whole culture with this kind of fabrication, envy, hatred, and destruction, look at the map of the Middle East. Look at the map. You can hardly see Israel. It's impossible to convince any person who has an IQ of a child that this problem is over the land called Israel. No way. And it's time for the West to understand this. Because it's not just not good for Israel, it's not good for the Arab world. They are collapsing. A lot of people think that the Arab world is so strong and so powerful. This is a cry of a culture that is in turmoil. It's rotting from the core. It's a culture that's desperate for help from God, but they don't know. Their religious leaders are telling them to continue the hate instead of telling them to repent and find the true God, the love and the friendship. But until today, even after the revolution, we have an Egyptian president who recently called Jews apes and pigs and enemies of Allah. It's the same story. They never stop. In the eyes of many Muslims, in the eyes of Islam itself, Jews and non-Muslims, they call them the kafir, the infidels. They don't deserve the truth. They don't deserve justice, and they don't deserve mercy. How can this happen in this day and age? And we accept it? And we don't say no? So we have a president in Egypt now who's an Islamist, and the turmoil is everywhere because you cannot have freedom and democracy. You will never, the Arab world will never have freedom and democracy when the hatred is number one, when the jihad is number one, when killing your enemy is number one, when you're fixated on lies and slander. You will never have peace and democracy. And they don't understand that. And it's because I love my culture I'm speaking. Some people call me, oh, you're an Islamophobe. I'm not an Islamophobe because a phobia is unreasonable fear. I think I have reasonable fear. Very reasonable fear. And some people wonder why. Nobody asks this question. Why all this lies and slander against the Jewish people, against America? They call America the great Satan and Israel the little Satan. Why? Do you know that on Syrian TV, on Arabic TV, on Egyptian TV, the constant day and night lies about the Jewish people is unbelievable. There was a show that was saying, and in it was not just religious leaders, some of them were scientists, Arab scientists, saying that, oh, do you know why Israel went to Haiti to help with the earthquake? You know why? Oh, you know why? Because Israel really wanted to harvest the organs of the Haitian people. These are the intelligentsia of the Arab world. When the intellectuals of the Arab world say that, what do you expect from the man on the street? And you wonder why they hate? Because day in and day out they are told this. I was told horrific things about the Jewish people. It took me years to extract it out of my mind, my heart, and my consciousness. It was not easy. And it's not going to be easy, but it's time for the Arab world to start and say, enough is enough. The Jew hatred it has to end. But there is a big problem why Jew hatred cannot easily be taken out of Islamic culture. There is a reason. If you look at the Quran itself, if you look at the history of Islam, if you go back to the 7th century, you don't have to go back to the 1948. 1948 is not the reason why they hate Jews. This is an excuse. In the 7th century, Muhammad started his message in Mecca, wanting an Arab religion, a religion that stems from inside the Arab world. And he linked it to the Abrahamic religion to get some credibility, and asked his people to believe in him as the Messiah. His people in Mecca rejected him. He spent 13 years in Mecca trying to spread Islam, and he only had 150 followers. Then he decided that peaceful means of spreading his message will not work. He left Mecca and moved to Medina. Medina was a Jewish town. The word Medina was even a Jewish word. It got taken by Arabs. Now it's a word that means city, but it's originally a Jewish town. And he went there. The Jews didn't kill him, didn't ask him anything. They welcomed him, as a matter of fact. In his early writings in the Quran, he mentioned the Jews in a very favorable way. He called them guidance and light in the Quran, righteous people, excelled the nations. But when the Jews rejected to convert to Islam, that was the big slap on him. He was not credible in front of his Mecca people, because he told them, I have an Abrahamic religion. I'm going to be the Messiah. The Jews are going to support me. I'm going to go live with the Jews because they're going to support me. And when the Jews didn't convert, he simply flipped. All the good things he said in the Islam, in the Quran about the Jews, the good stuff, completely the opposite. He started calling them apes, pigs, enemies of Allah, because he could not find the legitimacy he was hungry for. All he had were warring warriors, the fringe people, fringe tribes that were poor, that wanted to follow him just to benefit from him. And he looked at the Jewish tribes. They were prosperous, and they earned a living from hard work. Muhammad, in many of his hadiths, and I'm quoting Muhammad, I became wealthy through terror. He became wealthy through stopping the Mecca people, his own tribe, his own people. He would stop and kill them and rob the caravans, the trade caravans. And what happened is he started looking back as a prophet. What kind of prophet lives in a city asking the Jewish tribe, those prosperous Jewish tribe, to convert to him, and he's robbing his family in the caravan, and they are prosperous through hard work? He started looking back. It was time for him to take their wealth and kick them out to start looking good, which he did. He expelled many and killed many. And the last tribe, he took all the male over puberty, killed them. Almost 900 men of one tribe. He beheaded them. They dug trenches, and he beheaded them in bunches of 12s. He and his warriors spent 2 days beheading. That was the first Holocaust on the Jews. It was a beheading. And even him, after he did that, he took the women as slaves and the children as slaves, converted them to Islam by force, and they took many of the young women as sexual slaves. Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, had the first pick of the sexual slave. Her name was Safiya. And she stayed under his sexual slavery until she died. Even by Arabian Peninsula standards, the actions of Muhammad were not holy. Something had to be done to save Islam and its reputation. The Quran had to be changed to call Jews, they deserve what happened to them. You don't need to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a sociologist to understand why all of this hatred. Where did it come from? The Jews had to be called apes, pigs, and enemies of Allah. A description that's being said by every Muslim leader today. This was the only solution to save Muhammad's reputation, to save Islam. Islam has an existential problem. If Islam makes peace with the Jews and treats them as human beings, not as apes and pigs and descendants, what Morsi said was they are descendants of apes and pigs. If Islam makes peace with that, then they're going to look at their prophet as a murderer. So it's an existential problem within Islam to hate and reject not only Jews, but Jews and Christians and anybody, the enemies of Allah. Because Muhammad kicked out the Christians also and kicked outside the Arabian Peninsula. And on his deathbed, he entrusted his followers. His last words on his deathbed was, go chase the Jews and kill them wherever you find them, even if they hide behind a rock and a tree. He died in agony of what he did. But he didn't want to go down alone. He wanted everybody around him to do exactly what he did. This is a tragedy of Shakespearean levels here. And nobody notices it. I mean, all you need to do is you don't need to be a psychiatrist. Really, just read the Quran. You will see the story telling itself. What I'm saying now is not something that I created. If you read the life of Muhammad, you will read all that. You will read all of that. I'm just quoting. All I'm doing is just connecting the dots in an analytical way. That's all. And that is why Muslims today have a very hard time reconciling, because to reconcile with the Jews means they have to admit that Islam was wrong. It's an existential problem. And that's why when Muhammad died, his followers did what he commanded. They went and conquered Egypt, conquered Persia the same year, and then they went to Jerusalem, where the Jews are, and said, okay, now this is ours. We're going to build a mosque right on top of your temple now. Because now our prophet doesn't want you to exist anymore. And this is the only way we can make your memory gone. And make Islam's grave secret gone. It's almost by replacing you. The fact that they built a mosque on top of the ruins of the temple is a deep wish to replace the Jewish people. It's like somebody killing somebody and taking their identity. And nobody talks about that. No Arab or Muslim understand that. And I'm not a big psychiatrist. My IQ is probably average or a little more than. I'm not. Why did I find it so easy to analyze? I just put 1 and 1, 2 and 2, and just understood what I grew up with, and I read the life story of Muhammad, the ending, and how after he died they went to Jerusalem, chased them as he told them, and it's obvious. Nobody wants to face this reality. And even when Muhammad was doing after, there were verses in the Quran that reflected the agony he was in and the agony of the people who were doing the killing with him. He had many verses in the Quran telling them, don't feel guilty about killing. It's not your hands that is killing. It's the hands of Allah. Don't worry. You are going to be honored for killing them. You're going to go to heaven for killing them. The verse after verse after verse in the Quran comforting the Muslim warriors and the murderers, telling them that you will go to heaven if you kill the Jews and kill the infidels and kill the non-Muslims. Verses telling that it's not your hand that has the blood on it. This is Macbeth. If anybody... I don't understand. I mean, it's so simple. They felt very guilty, and many of them ran away. They didn't want to go because some of the Arabs who were encouraged by Muhammad to go kill the Jews in Medina were their friends. They lived and grew up with them. They knew them. They didn't want to go kill them. And Muhammad said, threatened them. He said, you're going to be tortured and killed. Allah is not going to love you anymore. You're going to be cursed. Verses after verses after verses in the Quran cursing Muslims who don't want to kill. And verses after verses after verses in the Quran telling those who kill you're going to go to heaven. The same way they told me after my father was killed that he was going to go to heaven. Glorifying killing became the only escape for Islam. And this is the tragedy we're living with for 1400 years. And that's why the number one enemy of Islam is the truth. Islam is a paper tiger. A lot of people think that, they only have oil money. That's the only strength they have. And unfortunately, the West doesn't want to drill for oil because we care about the caribou. Well, Saudi Arabia has been drilling now for 100 years. Excuse me, and the lifespan of people in Saudi Arabia is the highest in its history. Excuse me, I don't see any camels dying in Saudi Arabia from the oil drilling. I see that their habitat and the Red Sea is gorgeous. They're having great vacation spots in the Gulf. And they're drilling like crazy. Do you think the same companies that are drilling there can drill here without killing the caribous? Why are we doing this to ourselves? Why are we giving them our dollars to come and kill us and to finance Osama bin Laden? Why? And I want to conclude and then take your question, but before I conclude, it's time for America hands off saving Muslims from themselves. They go, Iraq takes over Kuwait. We go and kill our American young men to save Kuwait from fellow Muslim Iraq. Did they give us a good thank you? Do they appreciate us? No. We go to Europe to go to war against the Serbs with the Muslims. Did they love us? No. We go to Libya to save them from their oppressive dictator. We take him out. What do? They kill our ambassador and some American heroes. Do they say thank you to America? No. Stop it. Stop trying to rescue people who look down on you. And the more you rescue them, the more they hate you because they feel inferior. It's time for us to let them learn from their mistakes. When we keep rescuing from themselves. They end up hating us, not loving us, because they don't want to be loved by, they don't want to be rescued by people they call apes and pigs and enemies of Allah. It's tough on their pride, you know. So try to understand that point. And we keep doing that every time. When African nations fight each other and kill each other, we don't go interfere. Why do we do it with the Arabs? Why? The oil is a joke. We can drill and have our oil for ourselves. We don't need it. And also it's a joke because whether it's Saddam Hussein who's ruling or the Saudi kingdom is ruling, or it doesn't matter, they're going to sell it to us anyway. What are they going to do with it? Drink it? So, it's time to not be afraid of this tragedy, the Islamic tragedy against the Jewish people and the Christian people and the Western culture. Don't be afraid. What I'm telling you now is not to believe that you have this humongous, horrible attack. You are the strong side. What I want you to know, you have God on your side. And they, let me tell you, they are in pain. My heart bleeds every day when I see many, many Egyptians writing to me, save us, I want to get out of here. They are starting to realize something is wrong in their religion. They are starting. There is a lot of people who are leaving Islam. Islam is rotting from the core, and that's why there is a lot of turmoil, because they are not at peace with themselves. They are not at peace with themselves. Islam did not give them peace. And that's why we have to understand that we have the power. We have the truth on our side. I lost my family. My whole family. My mother is 92. She doesn't talk to me anymore. Why? Because I have a website called Arabs for Israel. See, this is painful for me, but the truth, thank you so much. The truth is more important for me. And I love them. I write to them and I say, I love you. But it's enough is enough. We have to stand up and say the truth. I want to see the Jewish people get offended. Please get offended when they say lies about you. I want a demonstration when they call you all these names. When they say, oh, 9/11, the Jews did it. I will be heading the demonstration in front of the United Nations. Because you always take the higher road. Because you look at these accusations, it's a joke. And I know it's a joke. But the problem is, this is not a joke to 1.2 billion people. And those 1.2 billion people, if 15% of them support terrorism, we're in trouble. So don't underestimate the power of this slander and lies. And we have to start a movement against slandering and lying about the Jewish people. And I don't want to call it anti-Semitism anymore. I just want to call it slander and lies. And we have to start speaking against it. Speaking against a person like the president of Egypt who's insulting the Jew. This is ridiculous. A head of state should not lower himself to that level. And we should speak about it and get offended and say, ouch. You know why? Because there are some kids in France who will be killed tomorrow by a nutcase who believes these lies. And it's our duty to stand up with this. I don't have to be Jewish to stand for the truth about Israel, to stand for the truth about the Jewish people. I owe it to you to speak the truth because my culture of origin have committed slander and lies And it's time to end it because it's not good for you, it's not good for them. And that's why we have to speak out. We have to make a big deal every time these lies happen. Arab terrorism is not just destroying or hurting Israel, hurting America, 9/11. It's destroying the moral fabric and goodness in Arab society. And it's time to speak about it. Open up. And I encourage all Arabs to start and speak because I know many of them. Many of them agree with me. Thank you very much. Well, anybody who leaves Islam must be killed. Actually, just recently, Morsi, the president, agreed for the death penalty for apostates, and Qaradawi, the head of the Sunni in the whole Arab world. He's a sheikh, the most popular sheikh, just issued a fatwa stating that anybody who leaves Islam must be killed, and if Islam does not kill apostates, Islam will be finished. So he even admits that Islam cannot survive without killing those who leave it.
Okay.
So
I'd like to get one question.
so I do have a death.
I want to give everybody a
I
chance.
do have. That's why I can't go. The only country I can visit in the Middle East is Israel. But that's their responsibility, not ours.
And that's what it is.
Exactly.
And,
And some people are.
therefore, I don't believe there would be peace.
Some people are already doing what you were saying.
Really?
There are some people in Egypt who are called Quranics, and they are rejecting the commandments for Sharia. But they are so rejected, and they're having a really hard time. But there is, because Islam is very hard to live with. Put aside the Jews or the Christians. Excuse me. Islam is very hard to live with and to apply and to have a peaceful society. So Islam causes a lot of chaos in society by nature. Even if there was no Christians, no Jews, if the whole world is Islam, you will not have peace. You will not have stability. You will not have human rights. You will not have democracy. Islam has an innate nature that is against stability and peace and human rights. So Islam has a big problem, and they're trying to solve it for themselves. But in the meantime, the Jewish people and America should preserve and protect themselves until they grow up. Okay? Unfortunately, it's going to happen, but my fear is that while Islam is self-destructing, it can bring down Western civilization. That's why I'm speaking. Al Jazeera, yeah, unfortunately, they bought the TV station here in the United States.
Al Gore.
Al Jazeera's mission is to spread the lies of the Arab world in America. The way the Arabs think is that we can make America abandon Israel if we just tell them our lies and our fabrications. So Qatar, the country that has, was it Qatar? I think Qatar, has Al Jazeera. It's the most tiny country on earth. To have a whole channel, buy a whole channel in America for that small country is why? Because they want to spread anti-Semitism in America. That's the purpose of Al Jazeera in America. They are already penetrating our universities with all these Islamic, and the government, Islamic Studies Department, Middle East Studies Departments. I go to speak on college campuses, and you can't believe the anti-Semitism that's already spreading in our college campuses. It's time to end all of that. But unfortunately, this is a free country, and they keep building mosques, they keep buying buying stations, and they're pouring all the oil money to change America. Well, that's what they think. But the problem is, even if there was no Israel, do you think they're going to live in peace and harmony? And no, that's why I'm saying the Jewish people represent to them the truth. Because Muhammad was very threatened by the Jewish presence, because it made him look fake. And that is why he wanted to destroy them. Until today, this feeling of fakeness exists, and it's dumped on the Jews. And they really think that they're going to be so credible. If we just get rid of the Jews, we're going to be credible. But they won't. It was uncomfortable to feel that, talking about hatred a lot, but I really thought it was me, because these were my leaders. They must be justified. So I had to struggle with it. One time I asked my teacher, why do we hate the Jewish people? And she said, how dare you ask a question like that? Don't you know? Are you a Muslim? You're a bad Muslim if you don't think this way. So the response is not a logical response. It's shaming. It's an attack. So I ended up, because I didn't want to be attacked, not opening my mouth again. You know what we can do? You don't have to attack the Quran. Whenever a Muslim leader or a Muslim sheikh stands in a mosque and insults the Jews and apes and pigs and enemies of Allah, show it on CNN.
CNN won't touch it.
I know. Well, that's our problem.
Even Fox News won't touch it.
That's our problem. Unfortunately, the West is undergoing a very difficult part of its history right now. The West is totally divided between those who value the Judeo-Christian culture and those who are anti-Judeo-Christian culture. And we have to admit, we have a good portion of this country that have been brainwashed to hate traditional religion, especially Judaism and Christianity. And what they're doing is they have become such socialists. Their religion became socialism. And when you do that, what is socialism? Socialism is loving control. You like to control people. You don't like as much freedom for the individual. Socialist countries like to provide everything for you, and you just work for the state. That's the extreme case. They put us all in cages and give us some food and work like the hamster. That's socialism, okay? We become part of the state, and you work for the state. And unfortunately, people who have a tendency to like control are attracted to the ideology, because they cannot let go of their fears of the world. Because this world is full of fear, and it takes only a believer in God to let go. So we need God to let go of our fear. We're living on a planet that's going in space. God knows what's going to happen tomorrow. But it takes a person with faith to surrender to God and just live their life in peace. There are some people who are so afraid of life that they want control. And these call themselves liberals, far left. They love control because they think they can really make this world safer. Let's make the earth safer. Let's protect this and let's do that. And so they really think they have an honorable cause, but they don't know that there is nothing we can do, really, except just leave ourselves for God. Who is very much like that? Islam. Islam loves to control people. Islam is not really a religion. Islam forces itself on people from the government. And that's why Qaradawi just recently said, without the death penalty for apostasy, Islam will cease to exist. When a religion knows that if they don't force themselves on people from government, that religion will cease to exist. So their only option, their only choice is control. The liberals love control, Muslims love control. The liberals kind of say, okay, let's ally themselves with them to destroy the Judeo-Christian culture, and then we'll fix them, we'll make them secular. They think so. They hate each other. I'll tell you what, it's even within Sunnis, they hate each other. Within Shiites, they hate each other. Islam doesn't teach peace. It doesn't teach love. The word love is never mentioned in the Quran. Love thy neighbor is not a value system. And on my next book, my 4th book that I'm about to write, is going to be about Islam and the 10 Commandments, and how Islam violated almost all the 10 Commandments.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Have a quick question? I'm going quick.
Very quick. In this room, there's people that voted for the wrong people in the last election. Now, they won't tell you that, but the big problem that's happening in America is people in this room have children, grandchildren, brothers and sisters that have lost their faith in Israel, lost their attendance in the synagogue and the temple. Until you get back to God again, as Jews and as supporters of the Jewish state, nothing's ever going to change. There's 20 million Christians in this country, thanks to Glenn Beck and John Hagee and people like that will go to war and die for the state of Israel. Will you die for the state of Israel? And will your children and your brothers and your sisters die for the state of Israel?
Okay, this will be the last question. You'll have a chance, because I want you to tell them something before. I want you to share something. I'll explain as a final word. Jordan.
Do you believe that Israeli territorial concessions will bring peace to
No. No.
Good question. No. Good question.
What will?
Islam will self-destruct. That's my prediction.
Wait it out. Wait it out.
Wait it out. Israel, what Israel needs to do is build the fence higher and higher and higher, and be resilient. Believe in yourself, believe in your God, and I know that God's protective hand is on Israel.
All right, Leah, I really appreciate it. We'll have a chance to talk to Nonie, and there'll be book signings. But I want Nonie to, you didn't share. It's in the book. It's one of the most moving parts of the book. Just very, very briefly, because look, we want them to buy the book. Describe the experience that you had, which had a big effect on changing your attitude. It had to do with your brother when he was...
Yes.
And you didn't share that story. Just briefly share that story, but they'll have to read the rest of it.
Yes. My brother in 1994, 95, he was working as the consul of Egypt in Gaza. I didn't say that he was the consul of Egypt in Gaza. And what happened is he was 43 at that time. He collapsed and had a stroke. He had blood in his brain. He was unconscious. Everybody, all the Egyptians around him said, what do we do now? Do we take him to Cairo Hospital? Or do we take him to Hadassah Hospital in Israel? Do we take him to our own hospital, our own doctors that we trust? Or do we take him to the hospitals of the apes and pigs and enemies of Allah? Each and every person around my brother said in the same time, you want him to live? Take him to Hadassah. In time of crisis, even Muslims know that they trust Jews. They call them names, but deep down inside, their humanity trust them. They trust that they are going to do the right thing because they know that they are men and women of God. And that's why I want this story. When my brother went to Hadassah, he was unconscious for 3 months. My mom went there and his wife to see him. And my mom was calling me on the phone telling me, I can't believe the Jewish people are so kind. They are not the people that we're describing. And I told her it's true. And it's time to end this hateful propaganda, but they can't because it's written in the Quran. And my brother is alive today because of Hadassah. He was supposed to die, and they saved his life. A lot of Arabs go to Israeli hospitals and their lives are saved, but there is not one thank you in the media in the Arab. Not one thank you. Because they don't want to credit Israel with anything good, even though they know it. And this is something, it's a shame. This is a real shame that a culture, they knowingly need your expertise, but they refuse to say thank you. And my brother, unfortunately, years after his life was saved, and I asked him, what do you think about the Jewish people? They saved your life. And he said, they have something very special, but I still have to consider them my enemies.
Because the Quran says so.
I still have to consider them my... They saved his life, and he still has to consider them. And this brother used to love me, and now he has nothing to do with me.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
It was great. It was great.